Welcome to The Path is Always Evolving, a podcast for healing humans and curious souls. Hosted by energy healer Tenya Eichenberg and mind body specialist Eva Zobian-Wolf, this show blends science and spirit to explore real life healing, self care, and personal transformation. No fluff, no fixing, just grounded conversations that meet you where you are. Because healing isn't linear, but the path, it's always evolving.
Welcome back to The Path is Always Evolving. I am your co-host, Tenya Eichenberg. I'm an energy healer and a self-care coach. And I have another podcast called the Metamorphosis Project Podcast. And with me today, oh, and there goes Oliver. With me today is my co-host, Eva.
Hello, I'm Eva Zobian-Wolf. I am a nurse and a yoga therapist. I specialize in stress, burnout, and how to manage your self-care into your daily habits.
And today we are going to talk about people-pleasing burnout. So, what is people-pleasing to begin with?
Oh, this is that whole idea of I need to make everybody around me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of leads from our previous episode of guilt on not being perfect and guilt on self-care. Because when we have people-pleasing tendencies, we always forget about ourselves. Always. So what are some symptoms of people-pleasing?
Oh, one is neglecting self-care, uh, agreeing with everything, apologizing for simple things,
Mm-hmm.
apologizing for things that aren't your fault.
Yeah.
Um, One of the big ones is overcommitting, saying yes without even consulting your calendar.
Oh, that's a big one for a lot of people. That's one of my pet peeves is it is people that don't that don't look at their calendars when they're planning something. And they're just like, "Oh yeah, I can do that." And I'm just like, "Okay, are you sure?" "Oh yeah, it's good, it's good." And then like a week before, a day before, whatever it is that you guys had planned, "Oh, I double booked myself. I'm so sorry. I have to cancel."
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, this all stems back to the state of our nervous system. So
Mm-hmm.
if you grew up with an overstimulated nervous system, and we've talked about this before with that that guilt about not being perfect and
Right.
what obligations do we have in terms of being a specific version of ourselves for other people. If you grew up with this expectation of you need to make other people happy, that their happiness is reliant on how you behave and the things that you do and say, your nervous system held that in. And here's something wild. You probably chose a career where you're of service to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So your people pleasing was part of your career choice.
Yeah.
Hello, nurses.
Yeah. All all three of my kids, I've just had to think about that for a minute. All three of my kids did not go into areas where they are of service to other people. In a way, my daughter went into HR, which if you're in HR, you got to be good at setting boundaries. You
That's the
can't be a
hope.
people pleaser if you're in HR.
That's true.
My other daughter, it works at a animal shelter. So she's an animal pleaser. But of course, animals are easy to please. You feed them, you take them out, and they're good to go. But she's also very good at setting boundaries. And then my son works for, um, he goes out and fills electrical products for construction sites. And so while he does have some interaction with people, it's not a people pleasing. I'm so proud of my kids
That is fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic.
because I was a
Um,
huge people pleaser,
Me too.
huge people pleaser, because that's how we were raised.
It wasn't until I was reading a book on burnout, talking specifically about the nervous system, and then they said the state of your nervous system created this people pleasing
Hmm.
mentality that you have. And then from here, it dictated you probably went into some type of career field. And I thought, and it reminded me of a conversation that I had with a therapist who had an office directly across the street from the hospital that I worked at. And he had said, I have a lot of clients from the hospital, and I will tell you that there's a lot of codependent relationships that are happening because you nurses feel like you need to fix everybody, and it's not
Hmm.
just your patients. It takes you bring this into the relationships that you enter into as well. And I thought,
Yeah. Yeah. I still have some of that creep in, the need to help, the need to help everybody. The need to, when someone comes to me with a problem, I do often still, because I want them to feel better. I want them to feel, because I have all these energetic tools, right? Because we do have all these tools in our back pocket of how to manage all kinds of different things. It's almost, it's like second nature for me. And so it's still, this is a big part of, I think, a lot of people who are trying to get away from the people pleasing. It does still creep in. And when that does creep in, I get thumbs up from, I don't know if people can see that on the YouTube, but Zoom just gave me a thumbs up for that. So I'm going to keep going with it. All these tools that we have in our back pocket to help us manage the problems that people are having. One, some of them being that they are in their own people pleasing things, right? They're being confronted with, um, I need to do this for so and so, but I also need to do this for so and so, and I need to do this for myself. And so often they'll push that self-care away to do the other two things because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to, they don't want to make ripples, because sometimes when you do say no, there is that fear of making ripples. But what I've noticed, and I'm sure what you've noticed, is sometimes when you do say no, actually probably most of the time when you say no, I'm sorry, but I can't do that, there is no repercussions.
so here's something that I work on with my clients and myself a lot as well too. No is a complete sentence.
It is.
And not only do we have to work on saying no or some version of no, we also have to work on receiving a
Mhm.
no
Yeah.
without asking for some type of stipulation,
Hmm.
explanation. No, I can't do that. No,
Yeah.
that doesn't work in my calendar. Or simply, let me check my calendar and get back to you.
Right. Right. There is one person in my life, my sister-in-law, who taught me, and I don't think it wasn't something, she didn't come out and say, no is a complete sentence, but she would often say no. And if you have people-pleasing tendencies and somebody tells you no, then that might trigger you, because it definitely triggered me in the beginning.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
please.
So, just like you said, when you felt triggered when she said no, it had nothing to do with her, and it had to do with a discomfort that came
Mm-hmm.
up in your nervous system because
Yep.
your nervous system is recognizing she just set a boundary and I don't know how to do that.
Yep.
And I don't know how to receive that.
Absolutely.
And taking the time to see those things and unpack them, to
Mm-hmm.
observe them, is part of our role, our learning, our growth process, our evolution as a
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that you can do to kind of figure out, gosh, what is it that's triggering that in me? One of the things that I did was I would journal about it, and I would write at the top of my journal, why is it so hard for me to hear no? And it took a while for me to be honest with myself. And I say a while, it took a couple days for me of me journaling about this to be honest with myself. And it part of it was there was a lot of times growing up that I wasn't told no. I wouldn't
There's
say I was spoiled, but I was stubborn and I would negotiate and I would get what I want. And no was a word that I didn't hear very often.
now, and the opposite, I did hear no a lot. And for me, where it came up was when I said no, it wasn't received. If I said no, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, that idea that when I say I don't want to do this, oh, you'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, I got that a lot too.
And so that receiving is
Mm-hmm.
a process.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, we've talked about this in another episode with obligation and that guilt about not being perfect.
Right.
When we discount the information that we're receiving from our body, we're breaking a promise with ourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just having a conversation yesterday with somebody about this. Somebody asked me, we were talking about uh, surgeries. What do you do? What do people in surgeries and ORs, what do they do when a surgery takes 12, 18 hours? She was asking a question, how do
Right.
they eat? How do they go to the bathroom? And myself and a paramedic were sitting next to her and we both went, "Oh, we just tell our body to shut up. We just keep telling our body when it tells us you're hungry or you have to pee, we just tell our body, shut up." And over time, we got really, really good at that. So we would get that information saying,
Right.
I need to go to the bathroom. And then we would say, yeah, we don't have time for that right now. You're just going to have to suck it up and drive on.
Wow.
And then when we get out of work, we wonder why we have
Right.
health issues and stress and tiredness
Yeah.
and urinary, bladder infections, right? And it's all of these things that we train our body to do, but we don't untrain our body.
Right. Yeah.
And so, when we have these moments of people pleasing, when somebody asks us a question, our initial thought is, how do I make you happy? Because what I'm receiving from my body is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to make you happy before I make me happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I think one of our purposes in this human existence is to find happiness in what we in our lives, in our current lives, not looking at the lack that we have. But
Absolutely.
it's really hard for us as humans, especially if we are raised with those people pleasing tendencies, with the um you know, got to make sure everybody else is happy. I mean, there are times when I can look back and go, gosh, I would make dinner, set the table, put everything on the table, call everybody to the table. And then, like you said in the last episode, your mom was always the last one to sit down. And I was as well, because that was my stay-at-home mom people pleasing tendencies, because it was a way. Now, people pleasing tendencies, this just popped in my head, it is a way of um pushing conflict away as well. That
Yes.
if you are not good with conflict, or you don't think you're good with conflict because you've never been successful at having a conversation that is conflicting with two different sides, whether you won or not, just having that conflicting conversation can be triggering for a lot of people. But people pleasing tendencies is a way of avoiding, got the thumbs up from Zoom again, is the way of avoiding conflict.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is that when we have those inner
Mhm.
discomfort, when we get into those moments of conflict and we think, it's just easier, especially if the person that you're interacting with has a very exuberant, passionate, dynamic personality, and they're not taking the time to ask, what do you have available, what
Right.
space do you have available, what resources do you have available for this, how can you contribute.
Hmm.
They're not taking the time to ask that. They're just saying, I need you to do this, can you do this. The conflict there, it may be easier to just say, sure, fine, whatever. I'll
Right.
do whatever you say. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be the, troublemaker. But each time we do that, we're telling our body, we're telling ourselves, our inner person, you don't matter.
Right.
And that leaves a mark on our body. It leaves an energetic imprint on our body every
It
single
does.
time.
It does.
And in the work that we do, what we're unpacking, this can happen in an energy practice, this can happen in any type of movement class. This is why yoga can be incredibly therapeutic, because what we're doing, and you don't have to know the story to release the energetic imprint.
Hmm. Right.
Being able to release that cumulative effect
Mhm.
helps us to start to see. And one of the other ways that we can do this is by starting to celebrate our little wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something small. I said I was going to go for a walk. I went for a walk. Woohoo! Right?
Yep.
Oh, there went the energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do we keep those promises? How do we show up for ourselves? And how do we practice our own self-care and be kind and compassionate? So, when we talk about this, it's not when somebody asks you, can I do this? No. Nope, nope, nope,
Right.
nope, nope.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, it's not a
Oh my gosh. So the other day I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and he said, I asked one of our mutual friends to be of assistance to me, and the person said, I no longer contribute my time for free.
Oh,
And he was just like, that made me angry. And I said, well, it was, while yes, there was a boundary that was established, it was not said in a kind and compassionate way.
right.
And so there is again, this, going back into yoga, how I interact with myself is important, as well as how I interact with you.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that kindness, compassion, and non-judgment needs to be happening in
It
both
does. It
directions.
does. We as humans have a lot of unlearning and relearning to do,
That's a very important distinction.
because, I don't like to point out, and I don't know if this is a generational thing, but the boomers And Gen X, us, our generation, don't have a whole lot of compassion for people unless we are in the areas that require us to learn what compassion is and how
So
to be compassionate.
can we take a moment and unpack that a little bit? Um, Emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
is not something that we talked about as Gen
No,
X and our parents, the
no.
boomers. Most certainly, they did not talk about their feelings. They
Mm-mm.
did not talk about, and I was in a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was relaying an event that had happened when I was 12 years old. And we were in an airport in Czechoslovakia. And at the time it was a communist ruled country. And the people in the airport gave our seats away. And
Mm.
our visa expired that day. So if we didn't make it out of the country that day, we were going to be in violation of our visa, which in a
Wow.
communist country,
Right.
scary, right? Me as a 12-year-old, my parents ended up that my mom's cousin came to see us off, and he actually worked in the airport, and he assisted in getting us onto the plane and getting us taken
Mm-hmm.
care of. Um, I just now, as I was relaying that event to
There's a lot
somebody
of stuff
else,
coming up.
I realized my parents never once talked to me and my sister about that event.
Yeah.
They never once asked us how we were doing. They never once, there was no reassuring us that
Right.
everything was going to be okay, that it was going to be figured out. There was a lot of reaction happening on the part of my mom and my dad, and we were just along for the ride. We were not considered, and our feelings were not considered in that moment.
Right.
And it was never
Right.
talked about in,
Right.
in
And
terms
it
of
was mostly because they didn't know how to do it.
exactly.
Right. And I think I think the Gen X generation is got to the point where they were like, we're not going to put up with that. Like we're going to raise our kids differently. And a lot of our kids are going to be millennial and Gen Z. Um, and so we're starting that path, and they're continuing it.
Yes.
Now, granted, there's still, there's still not all of them will have that emotional intelligence. Not all of Gen X is shifting into allowing their kids to have more emotions. But what I have seen is that a lot of the generations are shifting
So
in
one thing that
emotional
I
intelligence.
heard the other day was not everybody is here to evolve. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are here to show you where you need to evolve.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's an important distinction. Again,
Yep.
so recognizing that when it comes to our people pleasing.
Yep. And I think that's what my sister-in-law was here to teach me,
Mm,
was where, because in my I believe that everybody is a reflection of us. Everybody is a part of us that is manifested outside of us to show us what it is that we need to look at.
we say that differently, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what I see in people is a mirror. It's
Mm-hmm.
my shadows that I'm seeing in
Yeah.
them. What irritates me about somebody else is actually what I'm irritated about in myself. And it's an
Right.
opportunity for me to work on that portion of myself.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I have to see it and recognize it and then do the work on it.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. I had that come up. That's so, I mean, this is probably off topic, but I had that come up for me the other day. I was listening to something. It was a reel or a podcast or something. Um, and whoever's voice was on the other end of that, I could not listen to. I don't care what they were saying. It didn't matter what they were saying. I could not listen to their voice. And what that made me realize is that I have a hard time listening to my own voice. And I haven't done it yet, but I need to go back and listen to anything that I have been recorded on and listen to myself
Mm.
so that I can be more comfortable with using my voice as well as sharing it.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So the other day I was sitting there, I'm like, okay, I've got these obstacles in my life. I've got these obstacles in my business, things that I'm trying to improve, and I'm at a plateau. How do I get past this? And I've been doing a lot of listening to my guides and trying to listen to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I took a break and I was doing this little color block puzzle game. It's, move the pieces around before the time elapses. And there was one that I was just stuck on. And then I finally figured out the pattern, and I'm like, oh, I just need to figure out the one thing that unlocks the flow of the movement. And then all of a sudden, and I said it out loud, and all of a sudden I could hear like all my guides are like, yes. And I'm going, oh my God, I needed to figure out the
Yeah.
one thing. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what's the one thing? And they're like, you need to do more videos.
Yeah. Because that is a mode of communication for us now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When you think about it, in the 80s and 90s, it was magazine print, flyers, snail mail. You couldn't do commercials on, I mean, small businesses really couldn't do commercials on TV, and if they did, they were the best, corniest commercials. Um, but now we have video. And we have these amazing platforms that we can share our our thoughts on. So we've got about 6.5 minutes. But I wanted to touch a little bit on, like, when you are having people pleasing tendencies, and when do you know that it's time for you to like, it's bothering me. Like, your people pleasing is like your body's saying you need to shift this.
So when you are feeling your energy is depleted,
Hmm.
when you are feeling resentful,
Hmm.
when you are trying to psych yourself up. Now, that is a Gen X term for you right there.
You're right.
When you are trying to build up the energy, when you're trying to you have to have a conversation to motivate yourself to go do this thing. You have to justify it to
Right.
yourself.
Right.
Those
Right.
are all signs and symptoms that this is not something that you want to do. And from the body perspective, if you take a moment and you're just standing or sitting and you're kind of loose and relaxed, and you take a deep breath in, and then you start to picture yourself going to do that thing,
Hmm.
and start to pay attention to what does your body, how does your body respond? If you start to feel tightness in your chest, or you start to clench in, you start to feel
Hmm.
tightness in your body, or you start to, make fists, or anything where your body is telling you that it's trying to close off to that,
Right. Yep.
that is an indication you don't actually enjoy that. So how can you establish boundaries with that? And we're actually going to talk about that in our next episode.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but those are ways for you to start seeing those symptoms in your body. And awareness is the biggest part of this.
Hmm.
We were doing an exercise yesterday where we were trying to walk and engage the glute muscles, because as you walk, you're supposed to engage
Right.
you're supposed to engage your glute muscles as you take each step. And if you walk and you are noticing I'm not engaging your glute, you have to actually slow down really, really slow and take that step forward and feel that moment when the glute engages,
Hmm.
and then to take the next step and feel that again, your walk goes from a real nice
Mm-hmm.
pace forward
Yep.
to a super super slow glacial movement.
Yep.
And this is where the healing starts. This is where the evolution starts. Because first we have to notice, how does it show up in my body?
Right. Yeah.
And if we're talking about, start talking about something you absolutely despise doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If talk about going into a big crowded space with a lot of people and there's people bumping into you and you are getting jostled and they're spilling your coffee or your drink, and you see what's happening in my body as I'm talking about this, because I don't like being in spaces with a lot of people.
Yep.
But if I'm outside and I'm in nature and in sunshine,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lightness that happens in my body when I talk about the opposite.
Yeah.
And that's a big indication.
Yeah. Yeah. Some others are going to be also that you have difficulty trusting yourself because you're constantly asking other people, is this okay? Is that okay? And that was again, that was a big part of my people pleasing tendency is I would ask for feedback on stuff, on everything, because I did not trust myself for a very long time. So giving your power away to other people
That's a big one.
is another one as well. And that comes from that kind of leads off of the not trusting yourself, because if you don't trust yourself and you do constantly give your power away to other people because you don't know what is best for you, you're still trying to please other people. You're just doing it in a way that's pleasing the people that you're asking because you're boosting their egos. So yeah. So first step, anybody who is notices that they have any of these symptoms of being a people pleaser, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this at a later date as well, because there are so many. Um, I would, the first step I would take is just learn to say no without explanation.
And there's a lot of different variations where you can
There is.
say, you can, again, do this as it feels comfortable for you.
Right.
Create a statement, you can create a deflection statement. I don't know. Let me check my calendar. Let me get back with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an easy way to say maybe.
No without an
But
explanation.
yeah, no without an explanation.
Yeah.
Let me look
Yeah.
at my calendar
Yep.
before I overcommit.
Right.
There's so many
Right.
ways to say it, to say no and be kind and compassionate.
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody's asking you, um, can you drive them somewhere? They know that you don't have anything on the calendar and they need a ride somewhere. Hey, can you drive me here? No, I can't do that today.
And if
No,
they ask
sorry, I can't
for
do that.
if they ask for a well, why not? Because I can't.
Yeah. You don't owe anybody an explanation.
And that's a big, big distinction,
Mm-hmm.
especially for us women.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a future episode. Um, oh, it just popped in my head and then it went out. How other people respond is not your problem.
Yes. That's a
Yeah,
you
I really
that's
want to
a
get into that one.
that's a them issue, not a you
Yep,
issue.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And I love that we're starting to hear those words, those phrases more often when people will say things like, that's a them issue, not a me issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but that can open up a whole nother can of worms depending on what the issue is as well. So, yeah.
And again, this is all opportunities for us all to do our own work.
Yep.
And whether somebody chooses to do the work or not is not our responsibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you everybody for listening. Eva, where can people find you if they want to know more about the work you do?
They can find me on social media at Eva Z Wellness, and also my website is evazwellness.com.
Great.
And the
And you
links
guys,
are below the podcast as well.
absolutely, yes. And you guys can find me website, social medias at Design Your Existence. So thank you so much for coming in today and staying with us and allowing us into your space. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Where is the stop? Oh, there's the stop. Stop.